Welcome to Is This a Great Game or What? And our special guest this week is Kevin Pillar, former Major League outfielder, now in the media business. He's on Foul Territory. He's all over the place. He's doing great. Kevin, this is my son, Jeff. He's got a terrible voice like me. I gave him no height. Say hi to my son.
Hey, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, we just met before we got on live, and there's no mistaking you guys are related.
Is it the voice or the hairline? Because I'm starting to lose it just like my dad here. I'm getting the power alleys, as he says.
It's definitely the voice. It's definitely the voice.
Yeah, Kevin, when we first started doing this, people would say, Tim, I can't tell who's you and who's your son. It got very confusing to people, but that...
Right. I started telling people the episodes are on YouTube, so you can watch our mouths move, so you just don't get confused when you're in the car. But you can bet for real, if there's a pop culture reference, it's me, and if there's a baseball reference, it's my dad.
Right.
So we are so excited, Kevin, because not only Foul Territory, of course, Bluebird Territory. Love the show, love what you guys do, and we're part of the Foul Territory Network now in 2026, which is so cool. So thank you for welcoming us into kind of your media world here.
Yeah, it's been a lot. It's been fun. It's something I always thought that I wanted to do. And then you're kind of, you get released last year and you're on your own for the first time your whole life. Right. And you start to think about what you want to do next. And I mean, the world's got a funny way of kind of just working itself out. I was quickly brought on with Foul Territory, with mostly because of my relationship with Eric Kratz and, us kind of playing in the minor leagues together, a little bit of time in the big leagues. They brought me on. I really enjoyed that. And then the Bluebird Territory thing kind of just happened because of, being part of the Blue Jay family. I got a chance to do a ton of stuff with Sportsnet last year during the postseason, was able to kind of hop on for that amazing ride to Game 7 of the World Series. Partially how this probably stemmed is because we got a chance to talk during batting practice during that postseason run. And obviously the connection to Foul Territory doesn't help. And we recently just launched a podcast as well to the majors with, former closer Cody Allen as my co-host. And it's been a lot, but it's been fun. And, no one kind of gives you the roadmap when you get done playing. But, I've been pointed in the right direction. I've been able to meet a lot of great people. I had a lot of great relationships with people, and I think that helped as well kind of usher this kind of new adventure in the media space.
Yeah, well, I've known Kevin, Jeff, for a long time, but a couple of years ago, this always has stayed with me. We were in Atlanta, and it was an indoor batting cage, and we're in there watching guys hit, and we're standing next to Chipper Jones. And Kevin Pillar asked me, so Tim, what is your Mount Rushmore of switch hitters? And I only say that because, Kevin, not too many big league players are asking me something like that. That's a question that I ask to people all the time. So we discussed that, but your love of the history of the game and your understanding of who are the greatest switch hitters of all time, like where did that come from for you?
Well, first of all, I apologize for maybe putting you on the spot with Chipper Jones in the room. I do remember you put him on that list. And I mean, I think if he wasn't standing there, you probably would have put him on the list anyway.
Absolutely.
It would have been pretty awkward if he wasn't one of your four guys on the list. So that was probably bad timing. But I think for me, I was just always a fan of the game, and I think that's kind of, not to get into this whole idea of me promoting my own podcast to the majors, but that's kind of part of the idea of, what stemmed me to want to do it. And ultimately I brought in Cody Allen, a guy who lives out here. And I think I was a fan first, right? I think I was a fan of the game first. I wasn't playing as a 5 or 6 year old wanting to play in the major leagues. I played because it was fun. I was a fan of the game. I thought baseball was fun. And I never really kind of lost sight of that, even when I was a major leaguer, that there was a ton of great players and that came before me that kind of paved the way. I was obviously I was fan of these guys before I became a major leaguer. And I don't think you have to lose the idea that you can still be a fan of the game, even though you're doing it for a profession. Obviously you lose a little bit of, I don't want to say the love for it, because anything that you do as a job, no matter how fun it is, there's good days and bad days when it becomes a job. And ultimately, when you don't work for yourself, you have bosses, you get bad news sometimes. And no matter what industry you're in, sometimes that's hard to hear, so I think that's basically why I asked you that question. There's not too many people on earth that you get a chance to come across like yourself that are pretty much walking encyclopedias for the history of the game, and when you got a chance to be around someone like you that has that information and that knowledge, why wouldn't I ask that stuff? And I think I continued to ask you those questions during the postseason. And as I've gotten to know you, and as I hope to be around you more, as I'm entering the same space that you've been in a long time, I'm going to continue to ask those questions.
All right.
My dad is dreadfully embarrassed that you turned that into a compliment to him. The number one thing he hates the most is being complimented. But Dad, Kevin brings up a good point. How cool is it to be able to ask Tim Kirkshin that question? So it begs the follow-up, Kevin. Who's your Mount Rushmore of switch hitters? Who do you got?
Wow. I mean, I would say my list probably isn't a whole lot different than your list. And remind me who you said. I mean, you got to put Chipper on there. You got to put Mickey. You got to put Mickey Mantle on there. You got to go. I'm trying to remember your list. Did you put?
I went Mickey Mantle,
Eddie Murray on there.
Eddie Murray, Pete Rose,
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
Chipper Jones.
Yeah, Pete Rose. You got to put on there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to argue with that.
It's hard to break that top four.
Right.
That's for sure.
So also that day,
and I'm trying to think right now in the game. Is there anyone that you feel like could challenge that? Is there anyone currently switch hitting that? Obviously, maybe they're still early in their career. Maybe they're kind of in the middle of their career. Maybe towards the end of their career. But I mean, that's a really tough list to crack.
Yeah, I don't think we're going beyond those guys. So also that day, Kevin, I don't know if you were in this conversation, but I also told Chipper, I think this speaks to who Chipper is and who baseball players are. I said, Chipper, I've also got you as one of the 4 greatest third basemen of all time behind Mike Schmidt, Eddie Matthews, and George Brett. And Chipper, who I've known forever, looks at me and he goes, just like this, he goes, I would take me over those guys. That's what he said. And I'm thinking that this isn't like Chipper to be boasting about anything. But Kevin, you can help me with this. His point is, in this game, which is so difficult to play, you have to go to the plate thinking, I'm the best player. I'm the best guy for this spot. Do you think that's what Chipper was telling me that day? You have to go to the plate thinking, I have to be up in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I think it's easy for us to sit here, and obviously you're a historian of the game. You've been around the game. You understand the scouting and development part that goes into the game too. And we love to fall in love with this idea that there's really only 5 tools. But I think what he's referring to is maybe the 6th and 7th tool, which is obviously the mind and the heart. He obviously has the utmost confidence in himself and the utmost belief in he's the right guy for the job and the best guy for the job. It is a little bit crazy at this point in time that he would give you that type of answer. But I think once a competitor, always a competitor. It's like, Chipper, you've made it. You're in the Hall of Fame. You're in that conversation of greatest switch hitters of all time, one of the greatest third basemen of all time. But that just kind of speaks to potentially of, what set him apart. And you've obviously been in the game a long time. You've seen talent, but talent doesn't always result in a Hall of Fame career, right? There was probably a handful of Chippers before Chippers, but maybe it was that 6th and 7th tool that kind of separated him from some of these other guys that maybe had good careers or great careers or mediocre careers. And that's ultimately what allowed him to have a Hall of Fame career. Is even at this point being retired, I don't even know how many years he's been retired, a lot of years, because clearly he's in the Hall of Fame now. If you brought that conversation up to him, that's still the way he thinks. You can't take the competitor. You can't take the belief. You can't take the confidence. You can't take the swag out of some of these guys. And ultimately, that's a huge separator for a lot of guys in this game.
Totally agree.
This one's for the dudes looking for peak bedroom performance.
Blue Chew is the #1 chewable ED brand, and they just dropped their newest innovation. It is called Blue Chew Gold.
Blue Chew Gold dissolves under your tongue and works in as little as 15 minutes. Peak passion and peak performance in a single tablet.
That's right, 2 ingredients for blood flow mixed with apomorphine and oxytocin to turn up the arousal and connection in your brain and body. This is the future of performance. Faster, smarter, and precision engineered for results. See why millions of men trust Blue Chew. Now with a gold standard upgrade that's changing the game for good. Make life easier and discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our FT listeners. Get 10% off your first month of Blue Chew Gold with code FOUL. That's promo code FOUL. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast.
Speaking of Hall of Famers, Kevin, we just watched the WBC, and there were Hall of Famers all over the WBC. I'm sure you watched it religiously like the rest of us did. What was your ultimate takeaway after just watching that ridiculously great tournament for a couple of weeks?
My biggest takeaway is baseball is in a great place globally. I think every team that, aside from maybe a couple of the teams in the pool play, but you think about the Venezuelans of the world who ultimately won it. I think you think about the Cinderella story of Team Italy. I think you think about a team like Canada that made it out of pool play into the next round, missing some of their best Canadian players. You think about what a lot of these countries did. You got to love where baseball is at globally. That's my biggest takeaway. My second biggest takeaway is how much it just meant to these guys. And I come from this belief, and maybe you feel the same way, maybe you feel differently. I think there's been a lot of kind of unfair backlash. Some of these guys being very honest about what that tournament meant to them, what it would mean to win it. And unfairly, they had to compare it to what it felt like to winning a World Series. I come from the belief that both of those things could be true. I also believe that people can be a product of their environment, of where they're at. Obviously, how could you talk to Aaron Judge and he's telling you it's the most important game he's ever played in his life. That doesn't mean games that he played in the World Series were not important. It just means he's living in the moment of what's going on, and he is looking around him. He's experiencing something he's never experienced before. Representing your country is a huge deal. That doesn't mean representing your organization and your franchise isn't a big deal. I think both can be true. But I think, watching a country like Venezuela, win last night, and the pride that they had representing their country, the tears of joy they had representing their country, the sense of accomplishment they now have, and already talking about their rankings for 3 years from now, saying Venezuela needs to be ranked number 1 because we're the champs, I think just puts baseball in a great spot.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kevin, I got asked by a bunch of people today, like, what happened to the United States, offense? I mean, how can anyone slow them down? As a former major league hitter and a good one for a long time, could you explain to us what the hitting environment is like in the big leagues these days? The pitching that these guys see every day. Kevin, I say every night, how does anyone get a hit anymore? How do you view where pitching is and where hitting is in the big leagues today?
Well, I'm obviously shortly removed from the game, but as I sit in this chair, and as I always sit in this chair now, I have the same sentiment as you. Is I don't understand how guys hit it. I don't know how I did it. I don't know how guys continue to do it. Pitching's never been, at a better place in this game. It is so hard for these guys to hit. But to answer your other question, how could the USA be stopped? I mean, I think about two different sort of kind of answers to that question. Obviously, hitting's very difficult, but these guys are also in the middle of spring training, right? They're not fully, dialed in. And even if they were dialed in, I think it could happen to anyone. We tend to take this, entirety of this lineup and we think, how does it be stopped? But really a baseball lineup is made up of 9 individuals, right? Each one of these individuals has their kind of own way of preparing, own way of getting ready. And, hitting is so up and down. The best ones kind of minimize the highs and lows throughout their season. But it's very easy for 9 guys to struggle at once when you've only played. I mean, how many games did they play in this tournament? 9 games? Guys go through ebbs and flows of 9 games. It just happened that the United States hitters, 9 guys or 10 guys or 11 guys, whoever they were kind of rotating in and out, just never really got it going. And, lastly, I think the difficulty that the U.S. had, and I think some other countries do kind of, like the Dominican lineup, the Venezuela lineup that are made up of, entirely big leaguers. You still see at this point it means so much to them to represent their country, where not to say that the U.S. players have to kind of swallow their ego, swallow their pride, and understand who they are, but you're asking guys throughout an entire lineup to do things that maybe they historically haven't done. It's harder to get flow in a lineup when you have everyone's best hitter who's used to hitting in the middle of the order and being run producers. When you don't have a lot of guys throughout a lineup that are used to, their job is to get on base, their job is to move runners, their job is to kind of make the lineup flow. When you ask these guys to come together for 9 games, it's hard to kind of get that flow. And obviously, at some point, you think talent is just going to take over. But we also understand hitting's never been harder. Hitting's the hardest thing to do in any sport, across the globe. And it's just unfortunate that throughout those 9 games, there wasn't 2 or 3 hitters that were kind of stacked together that could kind of overcome a lot of kind of the inefficiencies that the U.S. lineup had.
Yeah, Kevin, I think that's a great point you bring up. 9 games versus 162, then a playoff. I mean, it's just a different world for our players, but the WBC, nonetheless, despite the lack thereof offense, was fantastic and so entertaining. And I told my dad even, I was like, Dad, I think March is given a run for October's money as the best sports month. Because
yeah, when I look back on, obviously I'm born here in the United States. I was rooting for Team USA. I wanted them to win, but I do feel like in some ways, if USA wins yesterday, I think we're sitting here talking about it's about time. That's what we expected to happen. I think the fact that a team like Venezuela did win is going to carry this conversation through the 3-year gap, or maybe it's a 2-year gap to the Olympics, correct?
Right.
And so we have kind of a version of this World Baseball Classic where the world stage is kind of around baseball. In some ways, I think it was kind of poetic, and I think it was almost even better for the sport that a team like Venezuela was able to win for those reasons. But I also think a lot of these other countries now feel like going into this tournament, such as Team Italy, feel like they have a legitimate chance. And I feel like players that are, I don't want to say associates, not the word, because people that are able to qualify to play for these countries, I think are going to be more likely to want to do it, because I'm sitting here and think about the couple chances that I had to play, and one was an insurance issue. One, I was early in my career, still trying to get my footing with the organization that, drafted and developed me. I'm thinking, is it possible I stay in shape, for a couple years and be able to kind of play at age 39 or 40 for a team in the WBC that I could qualify and play for? Because it just seems like so much fun. Like, we all dream when we're in spring training to go through the regular season and get a chance to play in the postseason and ultimately try to win it, World Series. For someone who never won a World Series but got a chance to play in the playoffs, to play in a March version of the playoffs where every game feels like a Game 7, what an experience.
Right. Kevin, I spoke 5 weeks ago when the Israeli team announced its WBC roster, and it was a tremendous night. It was so festive. Did the Israeli team ever talk to you about playing for them?
Yeah, that was definitely the team that I was referring to without referring to. But yes, it was Team Israel. I think, so what would have been 2 years ago's WBC would have been 2016.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Yeah. I had just finished what would have been kind of my rookie year with Toronto. We went into the playoffs. I was still kind of, finding my way within that organization, understanding how to be a big leaguer. Not really confident in myself enough yet to feel confident leaving my team in spring training. And then the other time they asked me to play was in 2023 when I was a member of the Atlanta Braves. I was just coming off the shoulder surgery with the Dodgers. I was on a minor league deal, having to, fight and claw my way back onto the team. I had talked to the GM of the Braves at the time, and he kind of said, I wouldn't necessarily advise you to go. We'd like to see you around camp to see if, you're the right guy for the job. My decision was made a little bit easier when, I was coming off an injury and insurance wasn't going to back me for that tournament. But now that I don't have to worry about competing for a job on a team, if, the universe works out and Team Israel would want to have me, and probably more importantly, to be an Olympian would be incredible, right? From 2 years from now, if they come calling and give me a little bit of heads up, I mean, I'm going to stay in shape because that's who I am. Baseball shape's a different type of shape, but I think if they called me and asked me if I wanted to participate in the Olympics, do I feel like I would be the best guy to go out there and play center field every single day? No. To be part of the team and platoon and maybe play a corner outfield position, or just kind of be like a resource and a mentor on the bench? Absolutely. Who wouldn't sign up for a chance to be an Olympian?
Well, we're going to cover you, all right? I'm going to get my dad on Bluebird territory so he can take your spot there in case you end up doing this in 2028. Okay, so we'll cover the back end of the media. We can't really help you with the baseball, but we can cover the media part.
The beautiful thing about media, as you guys know, with this type of media, is you can do it from anywhere in the world. You kind of create your own schedule. So I don't know if I'll necessarily need coverage, because the great thing about this laptop and this mic is I travel with it anywhere I go. But yeah, I think it would be a cool thing. I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure Los Angeles has deemed baseball as an Olympic sport.
Yes.
How they are going to do it in terms of, and I know that can be a whole nother conversation about, the potential, lockout a year from now, the PA and the union, what they're going to do. We have bigger fish to fry in terms of kind of trying to figure out a collective bargaining agreement, so we don't have a work stoppage, because like I mentioned earlier, I don't think baseball's ever been in a greater place. What we just witnessed with the WBC, what we're just coming off of a 7-game World Series, it's never been in a better place. But I do think that is something that has to be discussed. Maybe at the back end of this CBA, what they're going to do with the Olympics. Are they going to have a break to allow our best players in the major leagues to represent their country? Is it going to be a bunch of non-40-man guys, and the Olympic baseball kind of gets washed out a little bit, isn't as exciting as what we just witnessed? But I think that's a conversation for another day.
So, Kevin, you obviously have referenced your major league career, 10 different teams, and behind you, for those watching on YouTube, you might be able to see at Great Game or What. You can give us a follow and subscribe there. You've got 11 jerseys because you included your college jersey up there, right?
Yeah, I got 11 jerseys out there. When I started kind of this media venture, I would film in this room, and I didn't have a Blue Jay jersey behind me because I have one sitting here to my left. And then I went out, and it took me a long time. I was moving from Arizona to Texas. I had all these jerseys. I just hadn't had the time to get them framed. And then I finally had this beautiful room outside of my house that I could display all my stuff. It makes a nice background. So I ended up having like this perfect 9 squares, which included my college jersey. And then people were giving me a hard time that I have a Blue Jay jersey and a Giants jersey because I have them located elsewhere in my home. And if you see now, it kind of actually worked out that it actually framed out to be kind of a perfect jersey too. That was unintentional.
Nice.
I put these 9 jerseys up. I got my Blue Jay and my Giants jersey framed, and I was going to film an episode in here, and there just happened to be 2 screws on the wall for those Dodger Angel jerseys. And I'm like, okay, it looks good. I'll film the episode. And then someone pointed out to me it looked like a jersey. So I'm very happy with
We're rolling with that.
Yeah, I'm rolling
well,
with
Kevin,
that.
That college jersey up there, we thought this was very unique. So if you don't know this about my grandfather, my dad's dad, he was a mathematician. He was a PhD in mathematics, and you studied math in college. Is that correct?
Loosely, partially. Originally, yes, I would. Well, so yes, I did study math in college. The college that I went to didn't have necessarily like a specific business department as a college degree. So I did study math because if I didn't end up being drafted, I was going to continue going down that road of business school. So that was kind of like the gateway into business school. So I can't sit here and tell you I'm a PhD in math or a mathematician, but that was like the closest. That was like the closest sort of avenue to business.
Right.
Which
Right.
during the time I was in college, once again, I wasn't put on this earth to be a baseball player. That came through a lot of hard work. My parents didn't raise me to be a baseball player. My parents allowed me to be an athlete first. My parents allowed me to have other interest in things. So even at that time when I was in college, as much as I wanted to, get to the next level, which would have been the minor leagues, I was still preparing life to not have that kind of work out. So I was taking math. I was going to go down the business route. At the time in college, I still thought I was going to go to law school. What I was going to do with that law degree would have been probably a lot different than what I would do with a law degree now. I think I wasn't really kind of sure the direction that I wanted to go in. I was interested in law. What I found out much later in life, once I got drafted and got an agent and stuff, is, whoa, that's what I could have ended up being, was an agent. So if baseball didn't work out, I think that's kind of the direction that I would have. I love sports. I really do love sports. I love baseball. I love all sports. So I felt like that business degree or law degree I think I would have found my way into sports, whether it would have been agency, business ops, something around that, because I love it, man. I love everything about it.
Right.
I love everything that sports teaches you as an individual. I love what it teaches you as a teammate. I love the hard work, the discipline, the sacrifice you have to make. I love the idea that sports gathers a community. I love sports can transcend, sex, gender, religion, political beliefs, country you're born in.
Right.
When you have a common goal to achieve something, you've been around baseball your whole life. You get people from all different parts of the world, people that speak different languages, people that have different ideology, beliefs, people that maybe think differently politically, and you come together, you have something on the front of your chest, it becomes bigger than that. So I think that's the great thing about sports.
Right. Kevin, my dad went to MIT undergrad, and he was
What happened to you guys?
Yeah, no. My oldest brother got his PhD in electrical engineering from MIT. And by the way, my other brother, Matt, he and my older brother are in the Hall of Fame for baseball at Catholic University. So we grew up in a baseball house. My dad was a good player, had a great feel for the game. The point is, my fascination for numbers in the game came from my father. When we weren't playing and he wasn't teaching us how to play, we were sitting there with a baseball encyclopedia on our laps, and he was showing me that Joe DiMaggio, hit 361 homers and struck out 369 times in his career. I knew that, Kevin, when I was 7 years old because my father taught me. My point is, with your math background and your interest in the history of baseball and the statistics, they kind of go hand in hand. Agreed?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in terms of being a fan of the game, it allowed me to have interest, in things like you were talking about. As someone that pursued it as a profession, sometimes it was something that got in my way because I could calculate my batting average while I was standing in the outfield. If I knew I wanted to get back to 280, I could look at the scoreboard and be like, damn, I got 180 at bats. Okay, if we round up to 20 at bats, 200. Okay, yeah, I need 13 hits. I got to go 13 for 20. Oh man, I better get it going, right?
Now, Kevin,
so yes, to answer your question,
yes,
that's what sometimes we're doing in the outfield.
Right.
Is I'm looking at the scoreboard, figuring out if I go 13 for my next 20, I'm gonna be hitting 285, and I'm gonna go kind of into that 200 at bat mark, feeling pretty good about where I'm at. And then maybe I accomplished that goal. Then I'm thinking I got 300 more at bats. How many more do I got to get to kind of stay? So yeah, it's a blessing and a curse to be able to crunch numbers like that.
Right. Kevin, when you grew up in Southern California, who was your number one guy? The guy that you used to watch play and say, that's my guy?
Man, it changed a couple times throughout my childhood. I believe it or not, but I grew up, I would say once we got kind of into like kid pitch. So that's probably around 9 or 10 years old. I was a catcher. I love to catch. I love the action. I wanted to be back there. I always felt like I was a pretty like hard-nosed, tough kid. I love calling the curveball in the dirt with 2 strikes. I wanted to block it. I love trying to throw runners out at second base. So, Mike Piazza was, a guy that I loved early on in my childhood. Russell Martin, Paul LaDuca. As I got a little bit, older and I stopped catching once I got to high school, it was guys like Andre Ethier. It was guys like Matt Kemp. I loved, for some reason, I loved Blake DeWitt because I just felt like he kind of came out of nowhere. He became the second baseman for, I feel like I was kind of also gravitated towards kind of these underdogs. And I always sit here and tell people part of the reason I made it to the big leagues and I pursued it was I was very fortunate as a kid and I was very spoiled as a kid that I grew up listening to Vin Scully. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up a Dodger fan, right? And he had the most wonderful way of making a 5-year-old or 6-year-old kid who thought Major League Baseball players were superheroes or not from this world relatable. And maybe it wasn't at 5 or 6, but maybe it was like when I was like 12 or 13. I would be sitting at home. I'd be watching games with my brother and my dad and my mom, and I'd be listening to Vince Scully. And every once in a while, he'd be talking about, for example, he'd be talking about Connor Jackson playing first base for the Arizona Diamondbacks, went to El Camino Real High School, which was in my neighborhood, right? And I'm like, holy shit, that could be me, man. Like, he grew up right down the street from me. He went to the high school right down the road from where I went to. He didn't come from a different planet. He literally went to the high school right down the street. So he just had this amazing way of making these guys that we make out to be superhuman people at such a young age so relatable. And I never forgot that. I didn't really fully understand it as a kid. And looking back on it, I was very thankful to have him in my household every day and made me believe that I could be a big leaguer because I looked at myself and I was like, I'm not superhuman. I'm very normal, right? But when you have this relatability to people that went to the high schools in your area and they grew up, in Southern California just like you, it made me believe I could do it.
So cool. Now, Kevin, you named your daughter after Kobe Bryant. Is that correct?
My wife's not here, so I'll say yes. But my wife's here loosely, right? So we, when we found out we were having a daughter first, growing up and even to some degree throughout my, my career, people always referred to me as KP, so when we had a daughter, we wanted our firstborn to be like KP, like me, right? Because that was kind of my nickname growing up. And so we started kind of brainstorming this ideas of K names, right? And there's no mistaking Kobe was like my childhood idol. I grew up in Los Angeles during, the era of Kobe Bryant and Shaq, and then obviously Kobe on his own. And, we had the final two. It was Kobe and another name, a K name. And, we ultimately didn't decide until our child was born. And yes, there's probably an element of me taking advantage of my wife, my poor wife, who just gave birth to our first child, right? And she was okay with either one. And we have this beautiful baby girl. My parents, my in-laws are in the waiting room, and I'm like telling my wife, she's out of it. She just pushed out this child for the first time, and our whole life has changed. And I'm like, babe, our family wants to meet our daughter. We got to give her a name. And she's like, you choose. I'm like, Kobe. And now, honestly, it's like we cannot envision her not having that name now, right? Because, you never know really what your child is going to gravitate towards. And not to sit here and say my daughter's going to be a professional athlete, but I think growing up around it, me being a very sporty person, my wife also being a former college athlete too, we always kind of hoped and dreamed our kids would enjoy sports or like sports or be athletic. I would say kind of in the last 2 years, maybe year, my daughter has really kind of found her way in terms of at least wanting to be athletic, understanding it's cool to be a girl that's athletic. I think early on she was your typical 4 or 5-year-old, wanted to play dolls and be a girl and do certain things. And I think now she's understanding her body, and it can be cool that I like kind of hitting, balls in the cage with you, Dad. I like playing soccer. I think it's cool that I'm strong and that I could be physical, and that it's cool to work out and it's cool to train. So I think everything worked out for the right reason, because she is starting to be an athletic young girl, and Kobe is just a very fitting name for her.
Kevin, how is that? So I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, so I'm not quite there in the, sports yet. She's taking a dance class, so I'm the dance dad, learning the dance so I can help her when she has a recital in May. But when your daughter started playing sports, for you, did you find yourself like getting kind of revved up the way you would do when you would step foot on a major league field? Because that competitive edge, I don't care how old you are, you kind of get excited when your kid's playing, no?
Yeah, I mean, I also take with a grain of salt that she's also 8 years old. I never lose sight of that. And once again, going back to the idea of the podcast, it's okay for them to be 8. It's okay for them to just like it. It's okay for them to, understand that it's okay to lose too. Like, it's not all about winning. There is a development aspect that is important. I think for me, the greater challenge wasn't, does she like it? Does she not like it? Is she winning? Is she losing? I wanted her to understand when she signed up for something, she had to finish it. When she signed up, it means you got to work your best. Do you have to be the best player on the field right now? No. Should you work hard? Absolutely. If you have practice, if you don't feel like going, you still have to go. Those are the more important lessons that I wanted to teach her at a young age. And there was times early on, me and her mom had to fight her. Like, I don't want to go to practice. I had school. I'm tired, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's not about practice. It's about you signed up. It's a commitment. You have a responsibility to your teammates to be there. There was times, when I was coaching my son in flag football this year at 5, he wasn't feeling well. He had, I don't know what it was. I don't want to say like the flu, but he didn't need to be out on the field playing. And as competitive as I am, and I want him to be out there and I want to try to win these games, it was important for me to tell him, hey, you don't have to go out there and play, but you got to show up. You got to sit on that bench, cheer your teammates on, because we and you made a commitment to your teammates. Unless you're sick in your bed and you can't go, we're out of town, which is also okay at 5 years old. It's okay that you take a family trip and you go, you got things to do. You got a family trip to plan. It's okay for your son to miss his 5-year-old flag football game. We'll cover for him. That's why you have, 10 kids on your team. But for me, I just want my kids to work hard. I want them to be there. I want them to eventually love it, because without loving it, you're never going to be any good at it. You can be good at it, and at some point you're going to get burned out on it and you're not going to want to do anymore. So I want my kids to love it.
Right.
For me, I enjoy teaching her the game. It's been a little bit harder for me to sit on the sidelines during her games. I'm not the dad who sits in the chair and watches. I pace the sideline. I try to coach her a little bit from the sideline, because ultimately I just want the best for her. It's not a matter if she goes and scores a goal or she does X, Y, and Z. I see the game, even though it's soccer, I see the game a little bit differently. I see the intricate sort of things that, allow you to be successful. Like whether it's just pushing up a little bit when you're playing defense, get a little bit closer, do this, why'd you kick the ball out of bounds here? You had time to dribble. Like, I just enjoy teaching the game.
Right. Kevin, did you ever meet Kobe Bryant?
No, sadly I didn't, and sitting here talking about it many years later, it still like hits home to me, but I never really thought that opportunity, had an expiration date.
Right.
I felt like and I felt like even more so once I had my first daughter. I now have a second daughter, but everything Kobe started to do post-career in terms of trying to move the women's game forward, I felt like, obviously I would have loved to have met him as my idol. The idea of, working hard, the mama mentality is a huge reason I feel like I succeeded in my career, is because I felt like where I was able to lack some talent, I was able to make up for in belief in myself, but also behind the scenes, the type of work that I was to put in. But even more importantly of me meeting him in terms of what he meant to me, and as a a child, a teenager, and even throughout my major league career, kind of never losing sight of that kind of Mamba mentality. What he was kind of pursuing moving forward and trying to move the women's game forward as a father of now 2 girls. I think that would have been a really cool thing to hopefully get involved or meet him, or just learn from him and why it's important, and where I could have helped.
Right. And Kevin, where were you when he went for 81?
Where was he when I went for 81? I don't remember. I was probably at home.
Right.
I mean, I was probably living in West Hills, California, in my childhood home. What I remember more specifically is his last game. I was in Toronto watching the game. My parents happened to be in town, and him going for 60 in his last game, broken down, couldn't jump, couldn't move, had to work really hard for those 60 points. But I do remember that like yesterday. The 81 is burnt into my memory because I've seen it so many times since, on YouTube or the highlights. But in terms of where I was at, I was probably still, living at my parents' house. I was still probably a teenager at the time, but I do specifically remember his last game being with my dad, my mom, my wife, who didn't really care as much, but me and my dad being able to watch it together. That was a huge thing. Is my mom grew up with 2 boys, so it was a big part of her life, whether she liked it or didn't like it, or, watched it or cared or loved. It was a way that me and my dad and my brother just really bonded.
Kevin, you talked a lot about youth sports and your own kids. You talked about your own upbringing. I think it's so incredible for people listening, especially, we have a lot of families who listen to our show. For them to hear you say, oh, I wasn't born to be a baseball player, right? I had to work hard to do this. And you got yourself there. You got yourself to the big leagues, which is so incredible. And it's credit to yourself, to your family, so many others. But I think that's something that deters so many children and so many kids, youth baseball players, is the fear of the ball. I know me personally, fear of the ball took me out of the game. I mean, granted, I was always much smaller than the other kids, but once the kids grew up and Nick Pack in the 6th grade was now, 5'9", and I was still 4'6", and he's throwing 70 all of a sudden. I mean, that feels like 170 for a kid. And I know you faced your own battles. I mean, back in 2021, taking a pitch to your face, and fear of the ball is real, not just for kids, it's for major leaguers. It's hard to get in there. Can you talk a little bit about the fear of the ball?
Yeah, I think what happened to me in 2021, obviously, cosmetically, it was a blessing in disguise. I got a brand new nose. I got to kind of, it really kind of prepared me for this life in the media. Like the nose I had before versus the one I have now, night and day different. Like this is a much better face for TV. So, but in all seriousness, the great thing that came out of that experience, and I came back as quickly as I did because that's just who I am. Like I also understood at that point in time when I was a member of the Mets, we were in first place. We had so many injuries, and I felt this sense of needing to come back for my teammates. There was a part of it that I knew I needed to come back for myself because, much like you said, I think the longer that I would have allowed that to kind of fester, the more doubt or fear would have crept into my mind. The biggest thing for me was I'd played baseball. I mean, at that point, I'm 34 years old, right? I've been playing baseball my whole life. I think there was one other time in high school, I think I got hit in the chin with the pitch. Wasn't 98. I don't even remember coming out of the game. I think it was like a glancing blow to my chin. But I had to remind myself when it happened, how many at-bats have I taken in my life? And it's never happened to me before. Like, it is a reality of the game. It is part of the game. You don't see it that often, but it does happen, right? But that was my big thing. It was a kind of this reverse psychology idea that I played for a long time. It hasn't happened. It happened this one time. Why should I be scared of it? The odds of it happening are not high. One time out of the 20,000, 25,000 at-bats I've had in my career since a little kid, through the minor leagues, through the big leagues. That was important to me. But the great thing that came out of it when I was able to get back on that field very quickly was the amount of people that reached out to me in terms of moms and sons, moms and daughters, parents and kids reaching out to me, sending me videos, or not videos, sending me pictures of their kids sitting on hospital beds who had just gotten hit in the face. And they said that they wanted to be like me and they wanted to get back on the field as soon as possible. That was the greatest thing. The amount of parents that I had talked to through social media, sending words of encouragement, sending advice, giving them thumbs up, saying, hey, this is not going to define me. This is not going to keep me out. I want to get back on the field like he did. Where do you get a mask like that? I'm not afraid. I want to be on the field. That was the greatest thing that happened out of that, is the amount of people that reached out to me, the amount of people that my story kind of reached and touched, and were able to help people potentially not have that fear that maybe someone like you did have, at a younger age.
Knowing Dad Kevin's love of math, he's probably sitting there, and I just did a quick Google. All right, I've 4,409 plate appearances in the major leagues. That's 1 over, and it's 0.00023, rounding up there.
Yeah.
So very little chance it's happening.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it happens to someone like you at a younger age, where the math doesn't equate to multiple decimal points away, right? Maybe it's a 1% chance that you get hit in the face, and it could be enough, but. I think that also comes back to just having, more people like myself, more people like people I've come across in my career, where you really want to put the kid first. When it comes to youth sports, it's not necessarily all about winning at that age. It's about the biggest win for me as a coach of youth sports now is how many kids do I have signed up next year? Obviously I'm competitive and I want to win, but at a young age, so I coached football for the first time this year. Right when I retired, I got asked to coach my son's team. I mean, I'm literally right off the field to drafting a team, right? And that was the first meeting I had with the parents that I draft. I said, I'm competitive. I want to win, but not at the result of your kid not playing, your kid not getting a chance to score this year. And most importantly, how many of your kids do I have sign up to play football next year? If we get 9 out of 10, I'm going to say that's a successful season. If we win 2 games and I get 9 out of 10 kids in the end zone this year, successful season. That's kind of certainly what happened. We didn't have the best season in terms of wins and losses, but I got a lot of those kids in the end zone, and I'd like to think a lot of those kids are going to play football next year.
Back to Kobe for a second, Kevin. Pardon the stupid question from me, but let's say he decides he's going to lock you down. I'm sure you were a great basketball player because you were a great athlete at probably everything. If Kobe decides in 10 possessions that you are not going to score in a one-on-one game, you get the ball 10 times, are you going to score against Kobe if he decides you're not going to score?
No, not even close. Not even close. I think making that analogy can really translate to any sport, no matter how good of a athlete you think you are. And obviously I was one of the best in the world. I played in the major leagues, right? But playing in the NBA is totally different. And then you even dumb that down more to the person that never played at the highest level of anything, that thinks that they can go out and get a hit off Paul Skeens or Tarek Skubal,
even see a second pitch, Kevin.
Yeah,
they're going to see what 98 looks like and never come back.
I mean, is there the rare possibility that if Kobe is standing on me, I throw one over my head and it goes in the rim, right? Sure. Much like there's a chance that, the average Joe sitting at home may bleed one into right field off close your eyes and you can get lucky, right? But you ain't doing it.
No.
The people at the top of their profession in the sports that they play are so damn good, man.
I think it's 1 in 4,409.
I play in a men's basketball league with my brother and some friends out here, and that's how I kind of get my competitive fix. And we're in a competitive league, man. And we play some young dudes in our league, and we're clearly the old guys out there, and we hold our own. But there's times that it's hard for me to score in those games. I ain't scoring an NBA game. Is there going to be a time that everyone collapses on a guy driving to the basket and I'm wide open in the corner in an NBA game. Could I knock down a three? Maybe. But you ain't doing it. Like, the guys are just so good at the top level. You know, the gap is so large.
Kevin, can you still dunk it?
No, I can't, man. I can't.
But you did at one point when you were younger.
I could like dunk a tennis ball when I was like in high school, you know, like, despite what you see on a baseball field, a lot of that was wall aided. I don't have the vertical leap that, you know, like a guy like Mookie has, you know. I'm very good at a lot of things, like in terms of sports. I would consider myself to be very athletic. Like, I still like to wakeboard. I have a boat here. I like to wakeboard. I like to snowboard. Like, I can do all the things pretty well, right? And then there's levels to athleticism. Then you have guys like Mookie of the world that are like, like the gap between how good I was at baseball and how good Mookie is like probably the same gap of how much better of an athlete he is me. And I'm a pretty good athlete. There are just certain people on this planet that are just unbelievable athletes, man. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy.
We had Jerry Hairston on last year on this podcast, and he said that Mookie could play slot receiver in the NFL right now. And he said he would be the point guard for the Lakers right now if he wanted to be. Now, I disagree with that. But the point is, Jerry Hairston volunteered that to us, that Mookie is the best athlete like he's ever seen in a major league uniform. And you said something similar.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was making a point of just how damn athletic he is. I think there's just, if Mookie was 6 feet tall, maybe.
Right.
I think obviously just there's just a little bit of height restrictions in terms of in the NBA, and not to say that there hasn't been guys at that height to play, but just think about guys how talented of basketball players those guys are. Because there's only been, you know, a handful of guys playing basketball at 5'6", 5'7". Like, how friggin' good are they to be able to compete out there with the giants of the world that are playing in the NBA? The NFL, could he be a slot receiver? I mean, I think that's more likely because there are some shorter slot receivers that are really quick and they can get open. And I mean, Mookie's just a really crazy athlete. And I think Jerry was making the point of just how special of an athlete he is.
Right. Well, Dad, you managed to slip in your favorite question of can you still dunk, which usually comes up with most of our guests. I think we asked every guest last year except for our good friend Ken Rosenthal. It might have been the only one we didn't ask that question to.
All right, Kevin. We could keep you all day, but we got to go for your sake. But before you go, since you were a great center fielder in your day, you made more acrobatic catches in center field than almost anyone I've ever seen. So since we started with the 4 greatest switch hitters of all time, just tell me, and you can hurt some feelings here if you like, who are the 4 best center fielders? Who are the 4 greatest center fielders of all time? I have my list, but you can do either all-time center fielders or the 4 best you ever saw, or the 4 best you ever played with. I don't care how you do it.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a tough one for me, right? Because I got to put this out there, like a disclaimer, right? Even put it on when you guys like air this. Put a disclaimer. This is not my all-time list, right? Like, because how could I not put Willie Mays in there, right?
Right.
I'm going to make my list of 4 players that I saw play.
Perfectly good.
Right?
Respectable. I respect that.
Because I do feel like unless you were a true baseball historian like yourself that has studied the game, that has walked the Hall of Fame, that has been around these players, I feel like it's unfair for me to just grab these guys because
Ty Cobb, who played 100 years ago, right? Yeah, I
I'm
totally
not saying
get it.
He wasn't a great player, right? But I need to judge it off of what I've visually seen with my own eyeballs, right? So I'm going to put Ken Griffey in there. I'm going to put Andrew Jones in there. Where I go from there is going to be a little bit tough, right? I'm a defensive guy. And I also, the entirety of like the ball player, I got to put Torrey Hunter in there.
Great choice.
And then those 3, God, who would I put 4th? Man, I'm I'm gonna stick with those three right now because I don't want to misspeak on someone that I'm forgetting.
I think going down your line, and Kevin, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, you and I are a couple years apart. I think you're born in 89, I'm 93. I would probably, going on your vibe, Jim Edmonds came to mind to me.
That was honestly, when you said that, I was going to throw his name out there, was going to be Jim Edmonds.
I think that's a great choice.
Yeah, let's go with those four because there's probably someone that I could think of I would put ahead of them, of someone that I actively remember watching playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was there much better center fielders in the game than Torrey Hunter and Jim Edmonds? Probably. I think Torrey's going to get his time to shine in the Hall of Fame, hopefully at some point. Jim Edmonds probably not, but from what I remember from my childhood through kind of adulthood, I'd put those four guys up there.
That's a pretty good list. And Kevin played center field about as well as anyone that I ever saw. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. I am doing a Blue Jays game on the radio March the 28th against the A's.
I will be there opening day. I'm looking forward to catching up with you in person.
While I'm there, is there anything you can do about my nose, Kevin? Because my nose has got to change. I mean, you got a new nose and you're on TV.
Take one for the team.
What?
Take 98. Just go during batting practice.
Can I get a new nose without getting hit in the face with a pitch?
Yeah, I mean, you just call a doctor. There's great ones out there. I got a great one in Arizona for you. I'll get you her contact.
All right, I'll see you in Toronto, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.